thank you everybody for being here today. This has been really fun for me. We're just kind of touching on it during the break, that we've seen so much today that's exposing us to different aspects of what we consider to be this big ball we call digital humanities. And I hope today that what I have will be something maybe that isn't talked about as much, coming from the world of academic biblical studies. So before I start, I do want to thank Penn State, the Center for Global Studies, and the College of Liberal Arts, because they take really good care of me, and they let me dabble on the side in stuff like this, and that's really important. Then also the Jewish Studies program, which is housed under the Center for Global and International Studies at KU, who've given me a home this year, and libraries, so that's really important. My real research, the stuff that I'm actually trying to get a job in, involves archaeology, and as we were kind of talking about at lunch, if I could have my dream job, I would be teaching and digging. And this instantly pulls up that, Indiana Jones, the romantic notion of the professor who's running out of his office, escaping the grating, and then he's off to fight Nazis and find treasures or whatever. And of course, I've come to accept this Indiana Jones reference that's always attached to it. And in archaeology in general, we just kind of adopt that. Indiana Jones is the patron saint of archaeology, and we take it. And I feel like if a field has to appeal to a pop culture patron saint, that maybe in the digital humanities, they could look to The Matrix and Neo, because here's a movie that takes religion and philosophy and ethics and combines it in this, what was at the time really revolutionary in terms of special effects. And so that's why I've chosen this Moses in the Matrix idea today. But for those familiar with the movie, I've actually picked this for a serious reason. And if you'll recall, Neo, the main character, is unplugged from the Matrix and re-enters and has this sudden awareness of what's going on around him. And all of a sudden, everything is different. You remember this scene. There is no spoon. Okay, but not only does Neo begin to see his world differently, his material differently, he begins to manipulate it in a different way. And so as we're standing here today discussing a return to the material, I thought what better way to approach it than in a way that fundamentally alters how we interact with it. And what I want to take away from today is a little bit of how biblical studies, a field that's been doing digital for a while, has kind of matured across the last 40 years, really. And I hope that for some of you who are in these early phases of bootstrapping projects or trying to understand where this whole machine is going, will be encouraged by what a very traditional field has been able to do. So I work largely in ancient Near Eastern history, with a focus on the text and the material culture of the region. And so a large part of this work involves the historical critical study of biblical texts. And so today I'll talk about this as academic biblical studies, differing, of course, from like a theological or confessional application or study of these texts. This is literally one of the oldest humanities fields. These texts have been studied, interpreted, reinterpreted for the last 2,000 years. Our oldest commentaries, coming in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And with this kind of field, it's the heart of the traditional university. We've referred to this monastic lifestyle earlier. You think of these guys sitting around working on theology, working on text. And coming from a field like this, you would think that biblical scholars would be resistant to change. But this is actually not true. And they've actually been embracing digital tools since the beginning. Not that beginning, but since we could work with digital tools. As a widely read book, obviously when we can start digitizing text, the Bible is the first one that we turn to. And so it's digitized in English and other modern languages. But then we begin to put in these original languages. So for the Bible, Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. And we realized that, well, if we're putting in all of this Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic, there's a lot of extra information that goes with that. Anybody that's studied a foreign language knows that every verb can be parsed. You can have gender and number. If you're familiar with language with cases, and you have nominative, dative, all of these pieces. So a single word can have just a ton of data that goes with it. And what they did is they began to plug this all in, and where it eventually went was to the consumer. Obviously, with biblical studies, you have a large market, not just Christian, but also Jewish audiences for these materials. And so, out of just the sheer marketability of this, the field reached a critical mass. And these resources began to be developed for ministers and also people at home. I like Whitman as much as the next guy, but he's not one of the 12 apostles. And so this is where you have this difference. It's money, this interest, and all of a sudden you have magazines that are advertising these biblical software packages. And where this is today is a full-blown industry. I go to my annual conference and I see 5 and 6 different big vendors that take up, that premier spot that's like 6 booths long, and they've got computers everywhere. It's mobile now, it's on our phones. And this is a multi-million-dollar industry. And it's a digital text platform for analysis. This is not just the primary text in the original languages, but this is the secondary text, the lexicons, the commentaries, the textual apparatus if you want to do textual criticism, grammars, even high-resolution images of our manuscripts now are linked back and forth between the digitized text. And all of this comes with a complex metadata that includes that grammatical stuff I was talking about, but now even syntactical data. So guys at Toronto are going through, I think back to Derek's talk of the physicality of digitizing. These are grad students sitting around analyzing the syntax and plugging it all in. And so that's where biblical studies has come to today, after 40 years of working with the text in a digital format. And because of this, I kind of like to talk about biblical studies in a post-development world. I don't even know if that's a good term, but it's what came to me when I was sitting on the ferry to Victoria this summer, and that was what I stuck with. But what I mean is that the known territory has reached such a developed state that the new innovations are really just innovations. They're just pushing the boundaries, not redefining them. The truth is that in this post-development world, a fundamental shift has already happened in how we deal with the material. And I think about this in the same way that we might talk about cameras. And this is something I think that gets invoked in a lot when we talk about digital humanities. When is digital humanities just humanities? Well, when did photography not become digital photography? When did digital photography just become photography? When did journalism jobs stop asking for somebody with skills in film and digital media and just photography? When did that fundamental shift happen? When the digital was normal and expected. And so this is what's happened in my field, is that the digital has become normal and expected, and in a way that when something new happens, it's not a surprise, it's just a minor tweak. Something else that comes along with this is an increasing number of digital natives. When I began working in Hebrew and Greek in about 2005, I actually started working with digital text. And this really upset my Hebrew instructor. I came in one day and he said, "Eric, can you read for me?" Popped open the laptop and he said, "What's that?" I said, "It's my Hebrew Bible." He said, "No, it's not." I said, "You don't have a critical apparatus." And so the next day I came with the PDF of the critical apparatus. When I was in seminary in 2007, I remember looking around a class of about 40 and seeing 30 laptops, and 15 of them are Macs, and everybody has biblical software up. And so we've gone from seminary, where you think of this monastic discipline, big books, people studying, to where the text is being studied in this way. I look at my friends, colleagues going out on the job market. Everybody who's doing biblical research right now is familiar with these tools. And so there's an increase in the number of the digital natives. And so when I sit here today and I listen to the types of projects that people are working on, and I look around the country at these big archive projects that are starting up, I feel really spoiled. Because there are guys here that are working with tools and they're understanding the machines. You guys are the pioneers blazing the path, and I'm the trust fund kid that has 40 years of hard work that's been done, and I just use the tools. And this gets back to some of the conversations we talked about this morning of knowing how your tools work. But from where I stand in the future, if I can be so bold, in a field that's matured with its digital identity, there are a number of benefits. The first one is obviously that experimentation is extremely low risk. I can sit down and say, I wonder how often this happens in the biblical text, and know in 5 seconds. Whereas my professor, as he was going through grad school, probably would have had to go into the library, pull the book, worked through a concordance, and looked at every incident and cross-referenced it to see if whatever was being inquired actually occurs. Now this is a 5-second thing. And this kind of risk-free experimentation changes the kinds of questions that we can ask. I remember distinctly sitting in a graduate seminar and my advisor looking at me and saying, we'd been reading a Hebrew text, and he says, that's a really interesting construction that strikes me as unique. I wonder how often Jeremiah the prophet actually does that. And somebody from the end of the table goes, nope. He goes, what do you mean no? He goes, he doesn't, but Ezekiel uses it 8 times. It's probably a later construction. And so in that moment, we saw this shift. Because we were all working on a digital text, it wasn't a question of, I wonder if. We were instantly to the, this is where it occurs, this is how much, and already starting to assign meaning to that. And so when you start to work with this fundamentally different view of how you can interact with the text, you're sending out a whole new breed of scholars that approaches the text in a different way. Now, the fun thing about this is that the results of this kind of scholarship, we're using these digital tools, the results of the scholarship still look like the traditional metrics for promotion and tenure. Here are 2 books that were written entirely with the software that I'm about to show you. One is a simple vocabulary book, which has gone through the entire Hebrew Bible and sorted things by frequency. It's breaking it down by nouns and verbs, different ways, strategies for mastering the vocabulary. If my advisor told me to write this book, I could probably do it by the end of the week, just because of the power behind the software. The second one is much more complicated, and this one is made using a simple command, the infer command, and it just sets 2 sets of literature side by side. As long as they're in the same language, you can set the parameters for how many words you're looking in similarity, and you literally check each reference. And so this was made completely with software. It's incredible, the fact that you could do this literally with grad students that you sit down and say, I need you to do this, you're going to work on an hourly pay for $7 an hour, and have this massive database at the end of a year is incredible. This would have taken years to read through every bit of Second Temple Jewish literature and then try to find these allusions. And so the nice thing about this is that the tools that we're using aren't the end result. We've got past that, and that's why I say a post-development digital era. We're not spending time defending the tools we're making and trying to say, no, we belong, this is real scholarly contribution. In biblical studies, the things that are being produced are the books and the articles and the conference papers and the things that the department heads and the deans want to see as a sign of scholarly advancement. And now, if we can get it to work, I just want to walk you through a little bit of this software. And this is fun because it's playing, and playing is good. This is the software that I use. This is Accordance, and basically I can go to their website and buy almost any primary source that's relevant for biblical studies. I have any English version I'd like to go to. I can put in the Latin, the Vulgate. If you wanted King James, I could put that in. I have Hebrew. I have the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. Okay, and this is a fantastic environment, not just for exploring, but for teaching. This is changing a lot of the ways that we're learning the languages, because students can sit down and reverse engineer the text. I know, Derek, we're talking about Hebrew school. You can sit here, and if you watch this box down at the bottom, it's giving you all the parsing information for every single word as I go over it, which makes it really easy to cheat on homework. So there are pedagogical implications there. And the nice thing about this is that I was mentioning the exploration factor, this low-risk experimentation. So one afternoon, I was sitting, probably not writing my dissertation, and I thought, I work at a Philistine site. I wonder how many times the Bible talks about the Philistines. And so instantly, I've pulled up every mention of the Philistines. And of course, all my texts are scrolling next to each other. And I got down, I'll go back and do this the faster way. Not okay. Okay. I ran across this passage in Zephaniah that talks about the Philistines. I thought, okay, this is good. We've got a little bit of geography happening here. I know these places, but if I wanted to check quickly, say, oh, okay, there's Ashkelon. It's right on the coast. I know that it talks about Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, and Gath. You can zoom in. It's digital humanities, so we have to go 3D. And I can manipulate that. I can check it, measure how far is it from Gaza to Jerusalem. Too close at times, I think. Okay, so that's, instant connection there. Let's say I say, okay, I caught this in English originally. Ekron shall be uprooted. I know from my dissertation work that Ekron is actually the home of the largest olive oil production facility in the entire ancient Near East. Probably capable of producing close to 1/6 of modern Israel's olive oil at one site, an ancient site. And I thought, well, that's funny that a prophet would say that this city should be uprooted. I wonder if that's related to anything. So I came over here and I looked in the Hebrew and I said, Ve'ekron te aker. You can see those words are almost identical. Clicked on it, I'm instantly in my dictionary, no going to the shelf. And I find out that it has a pretty agricultural connotation. If I want to go a little further, I can just search for the root across the whole Hebrew Bible. Okay, well that's not going to give me anything. Well, here, now we can see how that's spread out. And I know because I've done the research that all of these occurrences in like Joshua Judges are actually talking about hamstringing horses. But these later ones are all agricultural. So instantly I'm able to temporally see a distribution and kind of a change in the meaning. And what this was is just an example of how you can fly through these fly through these questions. Maybe it means this, maybe it doesn't. And it was literally that fast. It was 45 minutes of playing around with it, and it's now a published article in a top journal in my field, and that was 45 minutes of writing to 2 weeks for a conference paper, submitted it, and probably a total of 6 weeks of work. But this is the kind of experimentation, and I wish I could afford all the manuscript images because then we could really play. But this is where biblical studies has gone. So today, what I want you to take away from this is not, here we are in biblical studies, we've made it, we've arrived. We're still playing. We're still innovating. This syntax module that I mentioned is something that's constantly being tweaked. But the encouragement for everybody here is that if we continue to take these steps forward in our individual fields, whatever they may be, that we're slowly increasing the amount of digital natives as the junior faculty take these positions, and it becomes something that builds mass. So I think this is an area to draw encouragement from, and maybe to ask questions of your own field in relationship to what biblical studies has been able to do over the last 40 years. And I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions.
It's really interesting because the terms on which you would kind of construct your narrative of progress seem a bit, to me, like new, because I would consider us, the way that we play in the digital humanities right now, to be a lot more at the conceptual level, not necessarily in trying to figure out how to write complex TEI structures, syntactical structures, or machines that can do this, like the Perseus project for Greek texts, for example. But we would be, for example, throwing topic modeling at the Bible, and this is and many other algorithms. This is the kind of playing that we would do. We would probably be trying to map out the Bible in some kind of chronotopic environment, which puts you right at the same place where we are. And us and them here might be false, but I'm saying, can you elaborate a little bit on how it seems to you that we are not? How are we acting surprised nowadays? For example, would be one way to.
How are we acting?
So, like, how's the digital humanities community acting surprised by new technology or by new developments, as opposed to, like you say, we're not surprised by new developments and playfulness? I just see us at the same place. That's why I.
Okay. The biblical text being such a confined corpus and such a studied and worked with amount of material, and I'll go back to Whitman because there's an archive project. The amount of eyes and the amount of hours spent on this, and the amount of critical inquiry that's been pointed at this, I think, is what sets it apart, I guess, in a way.
Compared to the Perseus project or the Women's Writers project?
I think so. I mean, I wasn't able to get into all the details of what this can do, but I think if you got under the hood of this, I think it's more advanced than what Perseus is able to do. They certainly function on similar planes, but I don't know. Perseus is not my field, so I can't speak to the details. Oh, please, up front.
I'm wondering kind of about scholarly communications in biblical studies. Have they, there's also debates of how journals are no longer the norm as digital methodologies kind of practice. So I'm wondering if biblical studies, if your scholarly communication practices, whether articles or papers have changed in format or use along with artists.
I think we're still very much a book and journal article field. And that's why this is really important to me, because for entry-level biblical studies jobs last year, the guys that were getting the jobs, have one book out, 5 articles, and 50,000 words on the next manuscript, and that's for a small liberal arts college, a Christian liberal arts college. So not even everybody wants that, and so the problem is the field, even though it embraces and uses these tools, is still very traditional in what it considers the metric for advancement. Does that make sense? I mean,
yeah,
there is some, there are e-journals that are online first, but then go to print later.
So it's still traditional.
But it's still very traditional in terms of the metrics.
Okay.
It seems to me that there's a danger for any field, whether it be biblical studies, classics, ancient or medieval Renaissance history, that deals with ancient texts, that these tools are so powerful that it obscures even more the tendency to think that these are fixed texts, when in fact there is no such thing as the Septuagint or the Greek or the Hebrew Bible. It doesn't exist. There are of course critical editions based on numerous manuscripts and manuscript fragments, and there's no such thing as the Vulgate Latin. I mean, there are different editions of that. So, but these tools are so powerful, I think it obscures the fact that there is no text. There are texts, plural, but these tools don't really deal with that.
Well, and that's, I mean, a criticism of ancient fields in general, and, if that wasn't the case, my dissertation would be done because I wouldn't have footnotes. I mean, part of the problem is establishing the text. And that's something, using these, you have to be critical. In all the articles I write, I have to establish the text. Even if I can punch this in and work, I still deal with those, whether it's textual criticism or what. I have to address those variants duly. I have to give them due diligence.
But the digital packages do fix the text.
They're no different than the books.
You still have more than one book, and you don't have, even when you have, for example, the standard Greek New Testament, it's understood that represents an addition of manuscripts that sometimes strongly disagree. And so it seems to me that there's at least the risk that in the digital world we'll get even further from the realization that there was not a text. There may have been at one time a text, but we don't have that now, and we're never going to have it. We'll have multiple texts. We tried to fix a text. We did that when we had printed editions, but this fixes it even more, it seems to me.
Do you want to add to that?
I think actually in these environments we can make texts kind of deform easier and transform them into many multiple virtual varieties. I am an editor myself. I've contributed to a critical edition on paper, a long one, a 7-year project. And I have worked on digital editions, and I have done work with what I call virtual versions of a text, in which switching from one book to another is a matter of a few clicks. Textual hypothesis, and destroying the text and reconfiguring it in so many wonderful and unexpected ways, all within the same environment, that it would take a scholar a few trips to the stacks to collect all these things and then lay them side by side and get lost in trying to find where those minute differences are, where here there's a sense of shared topography that makes it easier for these variations to manifest.
Briefly, I'm wondering if you could elaborate at all on the relationship between Oak Tree and its academic advisors. Do you know much about that? Like how that works? Because actually, I think in terms of the the economy of DH as an industry model, you don't see these types of arrangements in a lot of projects between what I imagine is a company that's doing quite well with a board of academic advisors.
Mm-hmm. So basically, the interface between the scholarly community and
Oak Tree, whatever.
Yeah, the corporation that's running. From the beginning, the base text, like this started with what you see here, BHSW4. This was a product that was put together by scholars, and all the grammatical tagging, all of this is done. And so the earliest relationship is between the scholars and the programmers. And as the company has grown and they've looked to diversify their offerings, people come and say, I'm really interested in the Samaritan Pentateuch. I want to work on developing this text so we can plug it in. And so literally the leading Dead Sea Scrolls scholars are the ones building these modules for the company.
Got it.
So it's really kind of cool. You go to the booth at the conference, and it's like all the rock stars of these individual areas are sitting there. You know, these are the guys that have handled the manuscripts, and they've helped build the tools. So that's neat.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you.